Alrighty, everybody, it is currently Monday, August 18th, 2025, and I'm coming at you live from a barrel tube where I'm absolutely getting pitted, dude. That was just barrel tube getting pitted. That's just some surfer lingo you land dwellers wouldn't understand, all right? You non-boarders, you guys wouldn't get what I mean when I say getting pitted in a barrel tube. It's just really complicated like that. Hopefully by the end of this, your little, land mammal brains will be able to understand what that means, but I don't know. I can't guarantee it, dude. And I do want to clear something up before we get before we get too deep into this topic. When I mock surfers, I say dude, and some people might find that ironic because I also say dude, but I just want to clear up the difference between the way surfers say dude and the difference between how I say dude. When I say dude, it's a short, curt, like straight to the point type of dude. You know what I mean? It's dude. It's not dude. Dude, you're drawing it out too much. And also, ooh, that's like the dumbest like syllable, or at least the dumbest like vowel sound. Like ooh and ooh. Those are the two dumbest sounding vowel sounds, all right? So when I mock surfers for saying dude, do not come at me being like, well, you also say dude, so therefore you're stupid. No, there's a difference between the way they say dude and the way I say dude. It's like the N-word a little, a little bit if you think about it. There's just a difference between the way we say it. All right. I say it way different than they say it. They not like us. I might have to let them know, hey, you're not like us. And I'm not mocking the surfers too much in this episode, you know what I mean? I don't hate them that much, but I do have a general like contempt for people who are like doing water sports like that, especially surfing, right? If you're like really into tubing or whatever, I'm fine with that. You're just a idiot getting dragged by a boat. Like that's fine by me, but like surfing, it just has like this general fakeness to it, right? Where they're like, yeah, we're just salt of the earth people getting out there and ripping waves. And it's like, dude, I did research for this episode. It cost a ton of money to go surfing and to go surfing in like the places that these people go, and for them to just walk around in like swim trunks all day. It's like, I know you're lying about how rich you are because I know how much money it costs to do this, right? Like even a surfboard is like decently expensive, you know what I mean? You could get like a 1999 Toyota Camry for that. Damn it, my light just turned off. Hopefully I'm gonna be able to read my notes, but whatever. Not like my ceiling light. I just have like a light hanging there that I turn on, but I guess it ran out of battery. But yeah, I do have like a contempt for like the play acting as like a normal person or as like a poor person or like a beach bum or whatever. It's like, dude, you drive a van. I know how much a van costs. I grew up around Catholics that had like 12 kids. I know how much like a van like that costs. It costs like a ton of money. And you also don't have a job, right? Because surfing is one of those things. I've tried it before, and I'll talk about my experiences a little bit, and it'll maybe reveal why I hate them so much. My personal experience with surfing will reveal why I'm talking so much shit about these people already. But yeah, it's just you're faking it, dude. I know you're faking it. Even like those old, like that's not a cheap thing to drive around. And the surfboards are also very expensive. Wetsuits, I don't think wetsuits are like absurd, but still, it's like I know you're not just like a little beach bum. I know mommy and daddy are over there at Lockheed Martin or whatever, designing missiles to drop on fucking, Yemeni kids or whatever. I know, I know your parents are like the reason why Gaza is currently a parking lot, right? I know somewhere in your family, someone in your family is responsible for sending Libya and Iraq back to the Stone Age. I know that's a fact, right? Because I know how much money it costs to be doing this, and I know like they are skilled. Like these are people. As much as I might dislike them, they are very skilled and they work pretty hard to do what they do. But it's still like, yeah, I'd be able to work that hard at surfing too if my parents like invented OxyContin or whatever, right? I would be able to do that too if my dad was like the chief engineer on the B2 Spirit, right? Like I'd be pretty fucking good at surfing if my parents were like the reason why the Middle East is barely functioning anymore, right? Yeah, I'd be good at surfing too if my parents were the ones that poisoned rivers in West Virginia, okay? Stop acting like it's like I don't know, some like you're just like some salt of the earth dude. I know how expensive it is. And I'm sure there is like some authentic beach bums out there that are really doing it like that, that just drive an absolute shitbox van with a few cheap ass surfboards on them and just go out and do it. And also the other reason why I'm like you're faking it is because everywhere that has like good surfing is like insanely expensive, right? The best places for surfing are like Southern California, absurdly expensive, at least in the United States that I know of. It's like Southern California and then like Hawaii. And Hawaii is like the most expensive state. Like a gallon of milk is like $50. All right. So when a gallon of milk costs $50, I can just kind of, generally assume that you're getting a little bit of support from someone else. You're not just supporting yourself by by going out there and ripping waves or whatever. And yeah, there are people that surf on like the Great Lakes and stuff like that. And to me, maybe it's just like the Midwest connection I have with those people. That feels like so much more authentic to me. You know what I mean? Because it's like just something about the Great Lakes is like no one who doesn't love surfing would choose to surf there. You know what I mean? Like Hawaii's just a beautiful place to be in the first place. So it's like even if you don't like surfing that much, if someone invited me on a trip to Hawaii, I would still go to that, you know? Even to Southern California. I would go on a surf trip to Southern California, but I wouldn't go on a surf trip to like Lake Erie or whatever. I don't know if they do it in Lake Erie. I think it's just Lake Michigan and maybe Lake Superior. There might be a little bit of Huron action in there, but I think it's just Superior and maybe Michigan. But that feels like authentic to me because it's like you have to love surfing to go surfing in the Great Lakes, especially when they do it. Like they have to wait to the till the middle of winter to do it because like the Great Lakes doesn't have big waves except for in winter because winter has all like the wind and stuff like that. So it's just like that's like a pure love of the game. But if you're like, yeah, I love surfing, I went to Tahiti. It's like, yeah, I don't know. A lot of people go to Tahiti. Not a lot of people are going to like the upper peninsula of Michigan in the middle of winter to hit the waves. It feels more authentic to me. There's just something more real about it. It's like I know you gotta love the game, dude. And also it's just like no one would choose to live there anyway, right? Like the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, you have to have a real love in your heart. Even if it's not necessarily for surfing, you have to have like a real love in your heart to live in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. So yeah, I'm just I, and it's also like I feel like there's a lot of like dickheads in surfing, right? I feel like surfing is one of those things that on the surface it looks like chill or whatever. It looks like just dudes with like long blonde hair in board shorts or whatever, going out there and ripping waves. But it's like, I feel like it has like that dickheadish culture to it, right? Where it's like skateboarding kind of has that, where it's like if I like pulled up to a skate park and I was like failing at skating, which I would do because I have horrible balance and I don't have a body for skating. I don't really have a body for a lot of types of sports. I have like a curling type of body. You know what I mean? I have like a I have a body for like throwing a stone on a piece of ice or like bocce ball or whatever. Like that's the type of body, the athletic type of body that I have. But if you, and it's like the same with weed. Like weed has like a heavy dickhead culture to it when it seems like it would be chill, right? Because it's weed. You'd think the people that would be involved in that are like super chill or whatever, but they're like the most insane dickheads. And maybe that's only like the extreme level of it. And maybe the same goes for surfing and like skating and stuff like that. But I just feel like they generally have like a superiority about them. And it's like, why? Because you can stand on a piece of fiberglass. I don't know. I don't know what you want me to say. It's and they are talented, you know what I mean? But it's still like, yeah, you're not all that, man. You're not like it's not that impressive, right? It's like people that can solve a Rubik's Cube super fast. It's like it looks cool, but if you like devoted yourself to that the way that they devote themselves to that, you'd probably be as decent as they are, right? It's like they're not better than you, at least inherently in any way. They maybe do have like a better work ethic than you. They maybe do have more of a passion than you have, but it's not like I feel like they think they're like athletic or whatever, or like you know, I don't know. It just feels like one of those things that it seems chill on the surface, but it has like a bit of that just like dickhead culture behind it, where it's like, yeah, man, yeah, totally, you went out there and ripped those waves. No, you didn't. You fucking suck at surfing. Like, I feel like it has that to it, and that's just like the general like vibe or like aura it gives off, you know? And a lot of things have that, right? Most things, when you get to like a certain niche community within them, they have like that dickheadishness to them. But I feel like surfing is just so many people have that, right? And it's also like it's hard to be a dickhead when you live in a van, right? Even though I said vans are like super expensive to live in and stuff like that, it's still like you don't even have a house, dude, right? You don't, your home is not in one place. If I can tow your house, I can't really have a lot of respect for you. You know what I mean? If I could pull up in like an F-250 and just take your house away from you, stop acting like you're doing something, right? So, stop acting like you're some like genius or like some, you know, like Buddha or whatever that just like unlocked the secret to life. If I, you know what I mean? If I can jiggle a hanger and break into your house and then put a screwdriver in and drive that thing away, stop with the talk. All right, that's all I'm saying. That's all I've said when it comes to surfing. But I do think surfing, and I think the reason that it has like this dickheadishness to it is because it's cool, dude. It is so cool to be able to go out there and just hit a wave and just like chill on a surfboard, right? Because like anyone that's ever been swimming in the ocean or anyone that's like experienced a wave before, it it instantly takes you out of the game, dude. If you get hit by a wave, you're like like, you're seriously, you cannot function after being hit by a wave. So to have the ability to like harness the power of a wave, there is something cool about that. I do have to admit, there is something very cool about it, and I feel like that's the reason why they're dickheads, right? Like anything that's cool like that has like dickheads within it, right? Whatever it is, if it can be perceived as cool, there are dickheads within it. And you know, it is cool. It is cool to go out there and do that. And a lot of them are like jacked hot dudes. That's the other thing. That's the other reason why there's probably a lot of dickheads in there is just because they're like jacked hot dudes that like think they're cool. But once again, you live in a house that that I could put neutral and push down a hill. So maybe calm it down with the, you know, I'm so cool. Um, but yeah. And they're also it's also like a very public thing to do, right? Because they're doing it for the most part on like pretty busy beaches where a lot of people can see what they're doing. And so I feel like there's like a show off aspect to it where it's like with something like rock climbing, like dudes that do rock climbing like that, they're hiking for like days into the middle of the woods to find some random rock somewhere, some random boulder, and just going up that thing. So it's not as like public. It's not as like observable, you know. The general public isn't really going to see a whole lot of rock climbers in your life. But if you go to like LA and just go to really any of the beaches, you're going to see a surfer there. And so I feel like that's also one of the aspects of it that like breeds that dickheadedness. And that is the best way to describe it is like just being a dickhead, right? Where it's not they're not like an asshole. They're not like smart enough. They don't have like the the proper vocabulary or brain power to be an asshole, but they're still mean, but they're stupid, right? And that's what makes them dickheads. Some people would say douche there, but I feel like douche is a little more, it's a little more intense than a dickhead, right? Like a dickhead is like, can be a little more laid back and just says like one dumb thing that kind of sounds like vaguely mean, whereas like a douche will be in like your face saying that, right? I don't think a surfer is like getting in anyone's face trying to fight them. Maybe they are, but I don't think so. I wouldn't be doing that if I was a surfer either, because also surfing, I have a little bit of personal experience with it. That takes the energy out of you, dude. Just being in the water that long takes the energy out of you. Like that's like Mike. That's why Michael Phelps ate like 12,000 calories a day when he was training. It's just because the water like physically saps the heat out of your body, and so your body has to like work overtime to like keep itself at the proper temperature. And so I feel like just like the laziness of it or like the laziness you feel like when you get out of it is why they're dickheads as opposed to douches. Yeah, that's just what I wanted to start off this episode with. And if you are a surfer, I'm sure there is for the most part pretty cool surfers out there, but yeah, I just feel like it just has that like feeling about it, right? Like anyone that's ever been inside of a skate shop before, there's dickheads in there, dude. Female dickheads. I don't know what do you call a female dickhead? A clit head? I don't, a labia head? I don't I don't know what you call a female dickhead, dude. A vulva head. I don't know what you call a female dickhead, but there's female dickheads in there too. And to anyone that doubts me, I would say go into your local skate shop and just be like generally ignorant. You know what I mean? And you will encounter, a dickhead. And that you could go into a lot of stores and that would be the response of the people who work there, right? Like a vinyl, like people that are into vinyl are like so like mean about it. It's like it's like it's like acting superior because of the way you listen to music is it's absurd. That's like a crazy idea. It's a crazy idea to like have in your head that like because you listen to pieces of plastic as opposed to listening to like digital music that like makes you better or something. And gun people have that too a bit, but I don't think it's much because I think the gun people you can't really be a dickhead when you're in the gun community because it's like everyone has a gun and they can just shoot you in the head or whatever. So it's kind of it's kind of harder to be a dickhead when just at any moment someone can pull out a weapon and end your life. I feel like it's harder to be a dickhead in that situation. I feel like fishing people, I don't know, though. Some fishing people are just assholes though, dude. But I think just people that like are around the water like that, just because just being most of those water activities are pretty costly, right? To do at like a high level. And so I feel like that breeds a lot of dickheadedness because it's like if anyone comes in there and like questions what you're doing, you're gonna get mad, right? Because you spent like, tens of thousands of dollars on fishing or surfing or whatever it is, boating. You spent a fuck ton of money on that so for someone to come in there and be like, yeah, I just don't find it that cool. You're gonna get defensive about it because it's like did I waste like the down payment of a house on a trip to Tahiti? No, I didn't. I'm right about everything, so I got to be a dickhead like to defend myself or whatever. When in reality, you don't really need to defend yourself like that. Like I think surfing is cool, but just being it's not the coolest thing, is all I'm saying. All I'm saying here, surfing ain't the coolest thing, but all right, let's talk about surfing a little bit. I'm done talking about how big of dickheads they are. We will come back to that later in the episode when I talk more about my personal experience. What surfing? Fuck, I got water on my notebook. Whatever. All right. Surfing. So, surfing is a surface water sport wherein a surfer or surfers, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, use a board to ride on the forward section or face of a moving wave of water. Pretty obvious there. Just wanted to clear it up a little bit. You know what I mean? We're talking about standing on the board. We're going to be talking about belly boards a little bit, talking about the what are those called? Boogie boards, stuff like that. Just a mention here or there. And I don't know, is sitting, I think you can sit on a surfboard. I think as long as you're not like just laying on it, I would consider that surfing. And belly boarding is pretty chill, dude. I think that's like a way more chill version of surfing. I don't think any like belly boarders out there have like a superiority complex about them. And I think like the main reason for that is just because of how like first of all the name of it belly boarding they call it they call it belly boarding. And so I feel like for that alone kind of negates any ability to have like a superiority complex about it. And also to be a belly boarder, you don't have to be like jacked, right? You don't have to be in like incredibly good shape. I'm sure a lot of them are, but you don't have to be like a surfer. Like in order to be like a really good surfer, you got to be in like pretty tip-top shape. But to be a belly boarder, it's like you're laying down on like a piece of foam or whatever. Right. And so I feel like for that reason, a lot of belly boarders, which I've never met before, and it's probably because they're pretty ashamed. You know what I mean? I feel like surfers kind of, kind of like capitalized and just like took the wave away from everyone else. You know what I mean? They like whenever anyone thinks of riding on a wave, they always think of surfers like and stuff like that, but they don't think of, the good old belly boarders or like the dudes who are just like body surfing, just bobbing their head above the wave and stuff like that. And so I feel like yeah, it's just that they don't get the respect they deserve. And so now we're going to talk about the history of surfing a little bit. Who really invented it? How did different people do it throughout history? Because a ton of people did it, dude. I thought it was like just the Polynesians or like just the Hawaiians or whatever. But I guess everyone was getting active in the wave, which I mean, yeah. If you're around water and like intense waves like that, you got to learn how to harness the wave. And so I guess I understand why so many different cultures around the world really started harnessing the wave, dude. Because it's like you can't let that dominate you. You can't let the wave dominate you. You know, some people, like the British, for example, they took a different approach. They didn't ride the wave. They made like big old boats to like go against the waves and stuff like that. Um, but the Moche culture, which existed in Peru from 3 to 5,000 years ago, I don't know if that's when it existed, but that's when they were surfing or started surfing. They used waves to carry themselves back after fishing trips. So these dudes were out there catching a nice mahi or whatever's out there. Um, I don't know what fish are around Peru. When I think of Peru, I don't exactly think of fishing, but it is on the coast. And there's also I don't know if the Amazon River like ends in Peru, but I know it's partially in Peru, so they're probably pulling up a whole lot of fish. When I think of Peru, though, I'm thinking more mountain stuff like that, like Machu Picchu, the Incans, alpacas, I guess. I'm more thinking, mountain and rainforest as opposed to, like chilling in the waves or whatever. But they do have some big old waves out there, and it is on like the Pacific coast or yeah, the Pacific Ocean. They have a Pacific coast. And I think the Pacific has like the waves are just bigger out there. Like the Atlantic just doesn't have waves like that. So I guess it makes sense that they were out there, but this is more of a utilitarian type of surfing. I'm sure the boys did enjoy it when they were like chilling on the waves, coming back on their boats or whatever, but it is more just like trying to get back to land with your whatever type of fish they caught. So they were doing that around 3 to 5,000 years ago. They don't really know. They were they were catching the waves, dude. They were catching the barrels, the tubes. Uh, I don't know any other names for waves, but they were catching those things and they were riding it back to shore. And so they used a kayak-like boat called a Caballito de Totora. And I think that means like the little horse or whatever. I'll look it up real quick to see what it means. But yeah, it means like something of the little horse. No, it doesn't. Yeah, every single search result is in Spanish, but it's something about a horse, dude. I don't know. I don't know why the Spanish chose to name it after like a horse because it's like they obviously have a word for boat, right? And this is obviously like a Spanish name. This isn't the native Peruvians didn't speak Spanish, and so obviously some conquistador came in, killed a few thousand people, saw these guys riding a boat, and I guess he was like, that boat looks like a horse, but it doesn't really. It doesn't really look like a horse at all. What it looks like is it's made out of like solid reeds in the front, like tight bundles of reeds in the front, and it kind of comes to a point, and then in the back of it, it has this like hold right where the fish would go, basically like a wooden container in the back, but it's not like a little container. It's like half the boat is like this little wooden area that they would just throw the fish in, no lid or anything, which that takes a fair amount of confidence to do. It takes a fair amount of confidence to just throw the fish back there and be like, I'm so good at riding on this boat, especially in the waves that I don't need a lid to put on this thing to prevent the fish from getting out of there. So, I mean, these guys were some master seamen, they knew what to do with seamen. They they really enjoyed their seamen. Uh, the the Moche culture really enjoyed their seamen, a whole lot of seamen. I mean, just seamen everywhere. But yeah, they were riding the waves to get back. And this boat, it is pretty sick looking. But the thing that makes it a little bit different from modern surfing is they would sit on it, right? They weren't standing up on the boat. I'm sure they were standing up when they were like catching the fish or whatever. But when they would ride the waves back, and some of them still do this, it's like a tradition that they still do in Peru. Um, they're sitting on it. You know what I mean? They're crisscross applesauce spoons in a bowl type of thing on the front of the boat. So they're not standing up on it and they're not doing any like cool tricks or whatever. They're just riding the wave back in, but I'm sure that's still fun. And to me, that would probably be better for me. Like I said, I have poor balance. I'm a short, stocky guy, and so I'm not really built for surfing. I don't really have like long arms that I can use to balance myself or like long legs or whatever. I got a pretty low center of gravity for like if I like move slightly, I instantly topple over. Um, and so I think chilling on a Caballito de Totora would probably be better for me, just because I don't got as good a balance. I'm sure it's still hard as shit, especially when you got like 80 pounds of fish in the back of it, but I think I'll probably be better at it. And maybe those fish in the back would be like a counterweight to me, because I don't think surfboards are built for dudes like me. I think they're built for dudes that are like 6 foot, 170 pounds, as opposed to like a 5'5", like 200-pound dude. So yeah, I think I'd probably be better on one of these types of boats. And also, I mean, let's think about it a little bit. The dudes down there, like the lads, they're a little bit more short and stocky. I don't know if I've ever met a Peruvian before, but I've met a whole ton of Mexicans. And I don't know how different a Peruvian is from a Mexican. I know some people are going to be like, "Oh, that's racist" or whatever. And it's like, yeah, but like how different is someone from like Ireland as opposed to someone from like Italy? They're kind of the same thing. They're Catholic, they like getting drunk, and they love their moms, right? They're pretty similar when it's all said and done. And so I feel like a Mexican and a Peruvian are probably pretty pretty similar type of builds, at least physically, you know. And so I feel like for that reason, the I always the Caballito de Totora yeah, Totora is probably built more for a guy like me, as opposed to like one of these surfer dudes who's just their body's basically designed around surfing. And I don't know how the Polynesians were like surfing like that because they're just like taller versions of me. They're just like 6 foot tall and just huge. So I don't know why they were the ones that really got surfing going. And spoiler alert, they were the ones, dude. Modern surfing isn't based on these dudes in Peru out there catching tuna or whatever. And so that's like the oldest known version of surfing or like using waves like that, right? Because like I said, a lot of boats weren't using waves. They were using the wind or like they were using paddles and stuff like that. But these dudes, and I'm sure they did have paddles to like get out far from the shore, but when they were coming back in, they were using the waves. Whereas a lot of people were using the wind or paddles to get back in. And the Incas continued this practice, and so do the modern people of Peru. The Incas saw this, and I'm sure the Inca killed a few people, but they weren't like the Aztecs, right? I think a lot of people get those two groups like conflated or whatever. The Incas, they were a little bit more chill. Yeah, I'm sure there was a bit of human sacrifice here and there, but I mean, a lot of people had human sacrifice. You know what I mean? You know, it's like when the Spanish pulled up, they just sacrificed every human. It wasn't like religious or whatever. When like the Spanish pulled up, it wasn't even like a sacrifice to get everything to rain. They just killed everyone so that they could have like gold or silver or whatever and stuff like that. So, but the Incas were a little more chill, they were just out there on the waves and stuff like that. But I do wonder if they were like ancient surfing dickheads. If there were people like that were like, dude, stop using that Caballito de Totoro like that, man. That's not how you use that thing. You gotta get one that's made out of fiberglass instead of foam. All right. I wonder. I wonder if there were people like that. And I wonder if there were like some dudes like would move their families so that they could like fish on better waves. I wonder. If they were like, dude, I'm sick and tired of these waves down here, and I'm trying to think of like Peruvian name or like an Incan name. The only Incan thing I know is Machu Picchu. Uh, but I'm sick of the waves down here. Me and my family are gonna move up there because people do that, dude. Like these modern surfing dickheads, which I'm just gonna refer to them all as dickheads, even though I know they aren't. But like these modern surfing dickheads, they'll like move their families to like Tahiti or Micronesia or whatever. Like just like a small like collection of rocks in the middle of the ocean. They'll move their families there so that they can like catch waves and stuff like that, which is kind of crazy. And I just wonder if there were ancient surfing dickheads like that were just like, man, my caballito is made out of cattail reeds instead of bamboo reeds. You don't even know what you're doing out there, dude. You know? And instead of a van, they had like a donkey or a llama or whatever. Yeah, I just live out of my llama and like go out there and catch fish and like, chill on waves and stuff like that, dude. I just got I just got my dad's old alpaca and I just like chill on waves and everyone's like, dude, shut up. I know you're not like just some common dude who's out there catching fish, dude. I know your dad's like a high priest who like sacrifices kids and stuff like that. Stop acting like you're just a common dude who's out there, chilling in the tubes, catching tuna and stuff like that. I wonder. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. And I don't think the Incas would have tolerated that. They would have been like, all right, you're being a dickhead about your Caballito de Totora. Looks like you're getting sacrificed to the rain god. So I don't think they tolerated the dickheadedness as much as white liberal pussies. And so now we're on to the people who really got things going. You know what I mean? We got to shout out the ancestors who were the first ones to do it. We got to shout out the originals, the boys in Peru riding on their Caballito de Totoras. But the Hawaiians are the ones that really got things going. So Hawaiians are credited with the invention of modern surfing. Yeah. I mean, it kind of seems like a stereotype a little bit. Like, yeah, Polynesians are so much more than surfing, but it's like I think that's their main one. I think that's like the main thing that like Polynesians like introduced to the rest of the world. I think that's like their big invention, or at least Hawaiians. I don't know, maybe fucking people from Tonga or whatever have like some crazy invention that I've never heard of, but I think their main thing probably is in tattooing as well. Just two really dickhead things if you think about it, dude. Like people that get like Polynesian style tattoos are usually pretty big fucking dickheads, except for like the Polynesians. And even probably some of those guys are probably dickheads about their tattoos, but I'm talking about like white dudes and black dudes and like non-Polynesians that get Polynesian tattoos. Like those dudes are usually pretty big dickheads. And so, goddamn, Polynesian culture is just kind of like entrenched in like dickheadedness. It just kind of it has that ethos about it. And like people that play the ukulele are fucking insufferable. I mean, like for the most part, anyone that plays a ukulele, it fucking is so annoying to be around. They're just whipping out the ukulele at any possible moment and playing Riptide by Vance Joy or Joy Vance, whatever that fucking band is called. You guys know that song? Going down to the Riptide. And they're always doing like covers of rap songs, not Vance Joy, but like people that play ukuleles. Damn. And I like the Polynesians, dude. Like, sorry, let me get a sip of water before I turn it RFK. But I like the Polynesians. I don't know. They kind of have like, they're almost like the Mexicans of the ocean, you know? You gotta have a little bit of a Mexican of the ocean spirit about them. But yeah, their culture has been adopted by like non-Polynesian dickheads. And that is, God, that's a tough, that's a tough one for those guys. But to be fair, they are all like freak athletes, so it kind of balances out a little bit, right? Where it's like, yeah, everyone that like embraces their culture tends to be a pretty big dickhead, but it's also like most of them are in the NFL. Most Polynesians as a whole are in the NFL. So how mad can you be? It kind of balances itself out a little bit. Yeah, that is a tough it's a tough one for the Polynesians, dude. Just so many like white dickheads like adopt their thing. And not just white. There's black dickheads out there that they're not surfing, you know what I mean? I don't think there's a lot of black surfers out there, but we are going to talk about that a little bit, the black people surfing, but yeah, it's just the most annoying people on earth have like adopted like the most well-known Polynesian like cultural aspects. And that sucks for them, dude, because like I said, I really love Mexicans and they're kind of like the Mexicans of the ocean. So it's a tough pull for them, but hey, they're fucking freak athletes. They can all run like a 4.240. So how mad can you be? Um, but yeah, so it was invented in Hawaii, or at least the modern version of it was. But surfing was brought to Hawaii in the 400s AD by Tahitian settlers who used a paipo, Paipo, paipo. They have like weird pronunciations for stuff like that, dude. They all have like it's like 90 apostrophes in there, and it's like but this one only has like 5 letters in it, and I still can't pronounce it. So maybe I'm very stupid, but it's pipe paipo. I'd imagine that's how they pronounce it. I'm trying to do like a Polynesian accent in my head, and then figure out how this word is pronounced. Pai paipo, paipo, something like that. But they would use this thing to surf, and yeah, and this is So in the 400s, the first wave of Tahitian like settlers arrived in Hawaii, and they were like the first people there. And then I think like 800 years later, I think it was sometime in the 1200s, a second wave of Tahitians pulled up. So like these people are pretty similar to each other. But when the second wave of Tahitians pulled up to Hawaii, they implemented like this insane like system of slavery. It was like the Indian caste system. This which is funny. It's just so funny to be like basically the same type of person, but be like, no, we're superior to you. We're superior to you. We're gonna make you guys all slaves, and we're gonna implement the caste system. It's just very funny to do that. Just like 800 years later, be like, holy fuck, dude, I forgot about Hawaii. Let's pull up there. And then they pull up there, and they're like, all right, you guys are all slaves now. You're all slaves now. But that's a little bit of history for Hawaii for you guys. And so now we're going to talk about the paipo a little bit. So a paipo is a short wooden board that resembles a boogie board in its construction and its use. So this was the ancient Hawaiian slash Tahitian boogie board. Um, yeah, they used it like a boogie board where you lay down on top of it and you catch the wave and you just kind of chill on that thing when you get in there. And that does make more sense for Polynesians, in my personal opinion. Like I said, a stand-up surfboard, you have to be like kind of a lean person to be able to use that thing. You have to have like very good balance to be able to use that thing. And having like a lot of extra weight on you is kind of going to throw off that balance a little bit. And look, I love my Polynesian brothers and sisters, but the the boys got a little bit of weight on them. They got a little bit of, was that a fucking smoke alarm? Fuck. I might be getting carbon monoxide poisoning right now. No? Okay, I think it was just a test. Sorry for that, but yeah, just the boogie board makes more sense for Polynesians. It just does, because it's like, they got big bellies, and so it kind of makes sense why they would use a belly board as opposed to like a stand-up surfboard. Look, I'm not mad at the guys. I'm not saying it's bad to have a big old belly. The boys got a big old belly, so it just kind of makes a little bit more sense for them to use a belly board as opposed to a stand-up surfboard. Like I said, love them. Basically, the Mexicans of the oceans. They're very religious people, work pretty hard. I've never had Hawaiian food, but I imagine it's probably pretty good. So, like I said, Mexicans of the oceans. And yeah, it just does make more sense, though. It does make more sense for those. You don't imagine Israel Isaac Kamakawiwa Ole, the guy who sang Over the Rainbow or whatever. You don't imagine that guy, standing up on a surfboard. I couldn't imagine him doing that. I could imagine him laying down on a belly board or whatever. And obviously most Polynesians or Hawaiians or whatever aren't as big as that dude, but they're a big group of people. You know what I mean? They're kind of like the Vikings of the tropical oceans. They're big dudes. They go on boats, they conquer land and stuff like that. So yeah, I imagine a paipo or whatever it's called is probably pretty. It's an easier thing for them to use. It would be an easier thing for me to use. Hey, I'm right there in there with you guys. All right, I'm a little bit shorter. I'm a little bit shorter than the average Polynesian. They're all like 6'2". They're all huge. Uh, but I imagine I'm a little bit. I got a similar build to them. I've met a few Polynesians in my day, and I'd say in terms of build, I'm similar to a lot of them. I've never met like a super lean Polynesian in my times, dude. I haven't met a whole ton. I am from Kansas, so I'm not I'm not chilling around the Polynesians a whole bunch, but from my understanding and from my experiences, they're a larger group of people, so it makes a little bit more sense that they're laying down on the belly board as opposed to standing up. And they're all different groups of people that have been like isolated for a super long time, so I'm sure there's like different body types within that. But yeah, yeah, they're big people. They got big bellies, dude. They're kind of built to float a little bit. They're not built for like acrobatics. They're built for like floating. They're a floating group of people. So it kind of makes sense. And so but Hawaii is the place where they did the stand-up surfing. That's the first place that they did it. Uh, but this is kind of an interesting thing. So the people of Samoa and Tonga, and if you don't know, those are Polynesian islands as well, out there in like the middle of the fucking ocean. They're just tiny little rocks out there in the ocean. But the people of Samoa and Tonga were believed to have been using planks and single canoe hulls to surf for 1,000 years before the Hawaiian tradition began. And it didn't really specify if they were using the wooden planks as belly boards or as stand-up boards. I imagine it was probably belly boards though, and that's probably where like the Tahitians got their idea. And they were using that the boys over in Tonga and Samoa, and they must be so pissed, dude. They must be so pissed watching like Hawaii get all like this tourism money and stuff like that. And I'm sure they're not that mad about it because they don't have to like just deal with like annoying like sunburnt white people all day. I do imagine that that's a pretty annoying thing to have to deal with. Um, but they must be a little bit pissed. They must be a little bit pissed being like, Hawaii, dude. We were doing that shit way before fucking you guys. Same with Tahiti. Like Tahiti's another big surfing place. I never hear about anyone catching waves over in Samoa and Tonga and stuff like that. And I do think that's part of the reason for that is I think Tonga's like kind of dangerous. I don't think it's like incredibly dangerous, but I don't think it's like a low crime place. And I think Samoa is just poor, and so they just don't like being around poor people. And also like every 3 weeks there's like a different story about how like the entire like island of Samoa got flooded. But yeah, those guys were doing it before. So we got to give a little bit of credit, like I said, to the OGs. Even if they weren't standing up on the surfboards like the Hawaiians, they were doing it before the Hawaiians, and so they get a little bit of credit. But yeah, shout out to those guys. And now we're going to be talking about black surfers here a little bit, more specifically African, not black American, which when I say black, like that's what I think of. I don't know if that's what everyone thinks of, but like I think of black Americans. And I know people are going to be like, what's the there's a big difference between the two, at least in my mind. All right. So I have a lot of opinions about race. It's an insane thing to say, but it's true, dude. The boys over in Africa, they're swimming a whole bunch. They're not the same. I think people like conflate the two in their head once again, just because of like ignorance or whatever. But like they're very different groups of people. Obviously, because one group of people has like lived in America for like 400 years or whatever, and the other one's lived in Africa for like 10,000 years or 100,000 years or however fucking long it's been. But very different groups of people. The blacks over here, they're not big fans of the water, but like you go over to Africa, they love the water over there. The boys over in Africa, they love chilling in the water a whole bunch. Um, so yeah, they had their own type of surfing thing going on. So in the mid 17th century, surfing was observed in Western Africa, not just on like that hump over there where like Ghana and Senegal and stuff are, that all the way down the coast to like Cameroon and stuff like that. The dogs were out there surfing, the boys were out there catching waves and stuff like that. Um, yeah, so they were out there surfing a whole bunch on the western, so like the Atlantic coast, not the Indian coast, the Atlantic coast of Africa. They were out there catching waves, and these must have been the first Atlantic surfers because the 17th century, there was no way they like the Western world or the world as a whole didn't even know about Hawaii yet. I think Hawaii, James Cook found it in like the mid 1700s. I'll have to Google that real quick, but so they didn't even know. They were just doing this for the love of the game. But this wasn't the same as regular surfing. So these surfers used belly boards to surf and also to learn how to swim. Like this explorer went down there, uh white dude from fucking I don't know where. But he went down there and he like saw that they would put reeds on the kids' chests and then they would like attach the reeds to the kids so that they could like float when they were in the water so they didn't like sink to the bottom when they were swimming out there. And that does make sense, dude, because we're talking about like the mid 1700s here. These guys weren't swimming in pools or whatever. They were in like the ocean or like rivers with like those giant tigerfish or whatever. So I understand why they gave them a little bit of a flotation device. Just gonna look up when James Cook found Hawaii. Um, but yeah, the guys over in Africa, they were out there catching waves. Not not the same way as everyone else was doing. Like I said, a lot of the dudes were out there doing it in canoes and stuff like that. But these guys were doing it on belly boards, kind of like the Tahitians and the Tongans and the Samoans, and also the Hawaiians. They just never thought about standing up on it. Yeah. So on January 18th, 1778, the English explorer Captain James Cook became the first European to travel to the Hawaiian Islands when he sails past the island of Oahu. Okay, so that's when they found out about it. So yeah, these African dudes, they discovered it on their own. They were like, dude, catching waves is fun as hell. Let's do it. You know, they didn't need the influence of the Hawaiians or the Polynesians to be able to do it. They were just like, hey, how sick would it be if I could ride that thing? And I don't think that these waves were as extreme as like the Pacific waves, but they were still pretty decent waves. There are people that surf on the East Coast. So yeah, shout out to those guys. It was just a whole bunch of people doing it too. It wasn't like one specific like culture. I think the main one that the dude talked about was in Ghana, which is on like that little hump in Africa, but it's on like the bottom of the hump. So yeah, those dudes were out there catching waves. So shout out to them. And so now we're going to be talking about how did surfing blow up? And obviously we know who dictates the global culture. All right, it's America. America dictates global culture. I'm sick and tired of people pretending that it doesn't. America dictates the culture of the world, right? When people are like Americans or like white Americans don't have culture, it's like you're just saying that because you live in our culture all the time. It's you know, you just live in American culture all the you wear t-shirts, you wear baseball hats. That is American culture, right? You ask someone from like, I don't know, Japan, for example, like what their culture is, they'll be like, oh, kimonos. Kimonos are our culture. And it's like, all right, well, Americans are like the ones that like popularized like or that invented baseball hats and popularized them. So that it's the same thing, right? It's just clothes. And so yeah, obviously it started off in America. So in July of 1885, three Hawaiian princes, these dudes were princes in Hawaii, took a trip from their boarding school in San Mateo, California to Santa Cruz, California. So yeah, I didn't know that like the Hawaiian royalty was like the same as like the English royalty and fucking shit like that. I didn't know that they were like sending their kids to boarding school and I don't know if they played polo and stuff like that, but I guess at one point they were a pretty powerful kingdom. And then America rolled up and they were like, nope, no more kingdom for you guys. We're growing sugarcane and pineapples here. The Americans pulled up and we were like, dude, we need we need sweet sugar for our coffee. No more kingdom. All right. And I don't know when they pulled up and did that, but they did at one point. It may be even after this because I do think for a while the the Hawaiian like monarchy was basically a puppet state for like American plantation owners in Hawaii. But eh, and that's probably how these princes were able to get to California in the first place is because the plantation owners gave their families a bunch of money to be able to exploit like their subjects, right? And so that's probably how these dudes were able to go to afford to go to a boarding school in California in the first place. But I'm not 100% sure. If I had to take a shot in the dark, I would say that's it. So, uh, when they got to Santa Cruz, they used redwood boards to surf the mouth of the San Lorenzo River, thus bringing the first known, or thus being the first known people. Sorry, my back hurts so much. Uh, to surf in California and just on the mainland United States as a whole. And these weren't like the guys that like popularized it a whole bunch. I don't think I'm gonna talk about those guys at all, but they were the first people to do it. And they had to have had some influence on it, right? Because this was just like a random like week or like weekend trip that they took down to Santa Cruz, California. So someone had to have seen them doing that and being like, "Yo, that rules. I'm gonna do that too." And I think like river mouth surfing is still like very popular in Southern California, where people like a river will be like right on the edge of the beach and they'll like dig out basically a trench from the river to the beach to be able to surf on the river as it's going into the beach. So a lot of people still do that and you can like look up videos on it. And I think like the really cool part about surfing a river mouth is that the wave doesn't stop, right? Because it's going out into the ocean as opposed to coming back to shore. So you can just like kind of chill on the wave for as long as you want. It's pretty cool to watch. But these guys were the first ones to do it. And their names, they had like their first name was like Jonah, and then their last name was like Kamakamachlurkamachalabach. That was Arabic, not Hawaiian, but you guys know what I mean. Their last name was like Kamuko right? It was like Jonah and then that name, which is a very funny dichotomy. Be like, yeah, I'm John Monteconto Untu. And that was more African than Hawaiian, but you guys know what I mean. And these guys were the first ones that did it. And I do think there is something like kind of cool about them using redwood boards, like just the fact that that's like it's a very like specific tree to Northern California, and it's just like the mixing of the two. cultures or two different like geographic areas to kind of create the modern sport of surfing in the United States. Sorry, dude. I'm trying to find a comfortable position. I don't know why my upper back is so tight right now. But these were the first guys that did it, and they used redwood boards to do it, like custom made. And obviously, they were princes, so they were pretty rich, and they were at a boarding school, so I'm sure they paid another dude to make the board for them. And that dude must have been so confused. Can you imagine what that dude was like thinking? Like these three Polynesian, you've never seen a Polynesian in your life, and these three Polynesian dudes just pull up and they're like, "Yeah, we cut down this 400-foot tall tree. Uh, now make this into a board so we can go stand on the water." He'd be like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" And then they'd pull out like a big old bundle of cash or whatever, and you'd be like, "All right, when do you want it done? When do you when do you want it done?" But that guy must have been at least decently confused. Just never seen a Polynesian before in your life. And now they're talking about like surfing. You're like, "Sir, what the fuck is that?" I would have been confused as hell personally. But yeah, they did it and they surfed the San Lorenzo River, which that river is like 20 miles long. So don't feel bad if you never heard about it before, because I've never heard about it before. But yeah, they were chilling on that thing. So California also saw the creation of tandem surfing, which I talked about a little bit before. Two people surfing at the same time. This is what that is. So tandem surfing is a style where two individuals usually do acrobatics while on the same board. So if you've ever seen like those pictures or videos or whatever of like a chick like standing on a dude's shoulder while they're on a surfboard together, that's tandem surfing. I thought when I first read it, I didn't like get the actual definition. It was just like two people surfing simultaneously. I thought it meant that they were like doing the exact same thing as each other, right? Like synchronized swimming almost. Then I find out, dude, it's two people on the same board, which is kind of insane. It's anyone that's ever been on a surfboard before, anyone that's ever tried to like stand on anything that's like hard to balance on. It's crazy that they're getting two people on there at the same time and they're doing like tricks and stuff. Pretty insane. It's pretty insane that someone figured that out. Um, but yeah, I'm just gonna take a venture or just a random guess here in the dark and say that was white people that did that one. White people were the ones that were like, all right, we got one dude at the board. Let's see if we can get two on the board at the same time. See if we can get this dude to stand on this other dude taller than the wave. Sick as hell. I think that was probably a white invention. If I had to just complete nonsense. Just like, what are we doing here? Because it doesn't, it's a very cool thing and it takes a lot of skill to do. More skill probably than like just a regular standing up on a board when you're coming in. But it doesn't have like the same spirit as surfing in my opinion. Like the spirit of like just one dude on a board or like one chick on a board is like it's just you in the ocean and like this little piece of foam or fiberglass or wood that you have just like kind of becoming one with nature. And then the white people were like, all right, yeah, that's cool. Kind of get past that. How do we kind of make this as far from nature as possible and kind of take away from like the ocean aspect of it? Let's do some gymnastics on this thing, dude. Let's get Simone Biles up here. Or maybe it's just more of an American thing. Maybe American is the better way to put it. Not just white people, but just like Americans being like, how can we not bastardize it, but just like make it completely different and not the same thing? Because it's not the same thing at all. It's about doing tricks while on a board. It's not about like being on the board and like kind of becoming one with the ocean and like perfectly balancing yourself with it. Although that definitely is a part of it because you still have to do that. But you're also focused on the other aspect of it, which is how can I get this chick to stand up on my shoulders and then now her head's above the wave? Yeah, just kind of two different things that they're similar in the sense that they're both surfing, but I think in spirit they're pretty different from each other. So now we're going to talk about surfing terminology a little bit. You guys are going to understand what I mean when I say tube, getting pitted, stuff like that, cutting it up. You guys don't really know what that means because you're land dwellers. You're not one with the ocean like I'm one with the ocean. Did my dad invent the bunker buster bomb? Yes, he did, but like that's not important, dude, because I'm not my dad. Yes, he does give me $400,000 a year so that I can like do stuff, but like I'm just a surfer and just a guy who's like one with the ocean. All right. Yeah. Okay. My dad did invent Oxycontin and he was the one that like introduced it to West Virginia. But how about you get off my case? Because I'm just a dude who like catches waves and stuff like that. That wasn't the best surfer accent. That was more like a Philly meets guy with Down syndrome accent is kind of how I describe that one. But it kind of captures the general spirit of the way surfers talk, which is retarded. And once again, I understand why surfers are retarded. They spend all day in the water, which like drains all your energy, and they spend all day in the sun, so their like brains are fucking cooked into mush. So I understand why they're retards, but still, they are retards. And so surfing terminology. We're going to start off with the basics here. All right, we're going to talk about what makes surfing possible in the first place. And the thing that makes surfing possible in the first place is waves. So you might have heard of a swell before. So a swell is a type of wave generated by wind blowing over open water. So yeah, I thought the waves came from the moon. I think it's just the tides that come from the moon, from my understanding, because I was like looking it up. Almost like every wave is a swell. Like all the big waves you see of like dudes in, Southern California or Hawaii or whatever, like dudes catching waves like that, those are all swells. And like the big waves out on the ocean, I think those are all swells too. I thought it was the moon, dude. I thought the moon was the one that was doing all this. Turns out no, it's the wind, which I don't know if the moon influences the wind at all, maybe like a little bit, but so yeah, it's just kind of crazy. I thought for sure that it was the moon. No, it turns out it's wind, which I guess that does make sense a little bit because it's like you never no, it does make sense, dude. You'd think it would be the moon like pulling because like that's what the moon does. It like pulls the water kind of up towards it. But that's just the tides. It's very weird like that. So yeah, swell is just the wind blows over open water, and then that's what gets the wave going. Odd. It's just kind of odd to me. And so swells form on coastlines where the ocean is uninterrupted by terrain. And so that's why you don't get like big swells on like the Great Lakes or like the Caspian Sea or even on the Mediterranean or whatever, just because it just doesn't have as much space for the wind to really get going, right? And that's why the Pacific has like the biggest waves at it or in it because it just has so much room for that wave to like get a bunch of power. That it's got a whole bunch of room for like the wind to get a bunch of power to like push the wave. And so that's why they have big old waves on in the Pacific Ocean. It's just because it's so much bigger. And that's probably why Hawaii has the biggest waves. Because it's just out there in the middle of the ocean. There's like nothing close to it. And so that's how they get those big old waves. But then I know South Africa and like I think Portugal also have big waves, which I guess does make sense because they're on the ocean and there's not really a whole ton of things to stop the wave in there. And I think does wind only blow from like west to east, right? Like, I don't know. Because like all the wind in Kansas, it blows west to east for the most part, just because of the Rocky Mountains and it like catches a bunch of speed going over the Great Plains because like there's nothing to stop it. And so the wind all blows from west to east. And that and like all the big waves are on the Pacific coast. Does wind only blow from west to east? I don't know, dude. Look, we're not getting into that a whole bunch. I think it's just probably part of it is because the Pacific Ocean is so big that there's nothing really there to stop the wind from blowing how it wants to blow, and there's nothing there to like stop the wave from doing what it wants to do. So yeah, hey, we're not gonna fucking figure out how wind works here. All right, we're talking about getting pitted on a tube. All right, dude. So and the ideal height for a swell is 3 to 15 feet, but they can reach heights of over 100 feet. Like I said, I'm pretty sure every single fucking wave is a swell. I'm pretty sure, like, other than tsunamis, they're all swells, which is just crazy. Like, I've heard the term swell before, and I was like, oh, that's probably just like one type of wave, right? But I think, like, almost all of them, almost like all big waves are swells, which is just crazy, dude. And this is like the ideal height for surfing is from 3 to 15 feet. And they were saying like 3 to 6 feet, like that's beginner type of height, like, and then you get to like 10 to 15. That's where like the people who are more experienced, not like the pros, but like people who are more experienced, they can catch waves at that height, which, yeah, that does make sense, dude, because surfing, at least for me, very fucking hard to do, almost impossible. I would say impossible because I've never stood up on a surfboard before. Um, but yeah, and like even like a 3 foot wave, dude, you're drowning in that thing, dude. If you get hit by a 3 foot wave, you there's a 90% chance you're gonna die. Even me, like I'm a bigger dude. I got a bit of fat on me, and I'm a pretty decent swimmer. And I was still like, like spitting water out of every orifice of my body. There was like water pouring out of my ears, and I was just like, so yeah, 3 to 6 feet does seem, even 6 feet is still like Jesus Christ. That still sounds very scary to me. And there are people that surf the waves that are 100 feet tall. I'll look it up real quick to see what the tallest wave ever surfed is before, but I think it's over 100 feet, dude. And I think the only reason I mentioned Portugal before when I was talking about big waves is because I think that's where the world record happened. So the largest wave ever surfed is a 93.7 foot wave ridden by Sebastian Studner in Nazaré, Portugal. God damn, dude, 100 feet tall. There's a video of it online from the World Surf League. Hell no, dude. That's terrible. And I think this guy's from Germany too. Holy shit. This guy from Germany. God, those German psychopaths, those emotionless monsters. God, yeah. He's from Essingen, Germany. That's crazy, dude. Austrian German surfer. I also know a pretty cool guy who is Austrian and German. I also know a pretty cool guy who was Austrian and German. He also enjoyed the arts. You know, surfing is an art, and this cool guy that I'm thinking of right now, he also very much enjoyed the arts. Yeah. So 93.7 feet, dude. It's a pretty tall wave to surf. That's like 10 times taller than any wave I've ever seen in my entire life. That's terrifying. And he was cutting it up on that thing. I think I've seen the video before. He wasn't doing any tricks on it, dude. This isn't the time to be doing an ollie or like a double McTwist or whatever. This guy was just going straight down on the wave, just being like, please, God, don't let me die. And I don't think he did die, dude. It wasn't Surf's Up. It wasn't Big Z hitting the rocks or whatever. And even Big Z didn't die. So surfing isn't that dangerous. And now we're going to be talking about barrels and tubes, dude. You guys are finally getting the answer you want. So barrels or tubes are waves formed when an offshore wind blows in front of the wave. It's- don't ask me how this works, dude, because in order for the wave to be moving towards the shore in the first place, it has to have wind blowing towards the shore, right? And then I guess another piece of wind comes in and it's like, no, dude, we're blowing this way, and now we got a tube. That's kind of, I don't know, that's kind of insane to me. Or the wind, like the wind that's blowing towards the shore goes around in front of the wave and then it makes the tube. But I don't know. I'm kind of thinking here that it's two winds going at each other, being like the waves going this way, and then the other wind's like, no, the wave's going this way, and then it forms a tube that you can surf in. It's just crazy, dude. I really didn't think that it was based off wind. It it kind of doesn't make any other like sense any other way, right? But you still don't expect it, dude, because you're just like everyone thinks of the moon when they think of like the ocean moving how it does. But no, it's the wind, bro. It's the wind doing all this shit. But yeah, so that's how a tube is formed, or a barrel, whatever you want to call it. I call it a tube just because it's more chill like that, and I like to get tubed. You know what I mean? uh, my favorite type of tube is red tube. All right, so yeah, that's how it's formed. It's either two winds going opposite direction or one wind going the same direction, but it kind of like curls around in front of the wave, and then it makes a tube. But yeah, basically all it is wind pushing one way, wind pushing the other way. Now we got a tube that we can surf in. Pretty chill. And barrels are ideal for experienced surfers, and surfing perfectly inside a tube is called getting tubed. Yeah, pretty sick. And it makes sense why it's like better for more experienced surfers, just because like even just standing up, it's so hard. It's so hard to even like stand up on it. And so now you got to balance the fact that there's water on one side and water on the other side. And I do imagine it's like the greatest experience on earth, dude. I do imagine that it just feels like the best. Even like that scene in Surf's Up where Cody Maverick catches the tube and he's like inside the tube. Even just like watching that scene, like where he like puts his hand or his flipper out and he like runs it through the water. Like that's a very cool scene just to even watch. And so I imagine like being inside of that thing, it just might be like a moment of peace. Just like nothing around you. You can't even hear anything around you because like the water's just like so loud. It's just like and you're just inside of that thing and all you can see is like water around you. It must rule so much, dude. It just must be the best. And maybe that's why surfers are dickheads, because like they're so addicted to the tube that when they're not getting tubed, they're like having like a withdrawal from it, like they're on heroin or whatever, right? Like they're getting withdrawal from like not being able to get tubed. So that might also be an explanation as to why surfers are such big dickheads, dude. It's 'cause they're going through withdrawal. They're like, man, I need to get tubed. Man, you got a tube for me to ride in, please. Please let me ride in the tube. So, and also, what's getting pitted? Getting pitted can also refer to the barrel wave. Uh, okay, getting tubed and getting pitted are the same thing, but getting pitted can also refer to like if the barrel wave crashes down on you. Sorry, I wrote my notes very poorly. But yeah, so getting tubed, that always refers to the act of riding inside of the barrel or tube wave. But getting pitted can either be riding inside of that tube wave, or if you mess it up a little bit and the wave like kind of collapses in on you, that's also getting pitted. So when you hear like a guy being like, whoop how, and then I got pitted, that's what he's talking about, dude. You know, when you hear "wapow" and getting pitted in the same sentence, that means that the barrel wave collapsed in on him, as opposed to him just riding inside of the tube. So yeah, if you want to know what getting pitted mean, that's it. It means almost dying. It means the water's collapsing in on you, and there's another wave coming, and you're probably gonna drown to death. That's what getting pitted is. So yeah, that's what getting pitted is. I've never gotten pitted before, dude. I basically spent the entire time I was surfing getting pitted though. I wasn't we weren't dealing with barrels or tubes or anything, but I was getting knocked off my board a whole lot. So I don't know if that counts as getting pitted. And so our next piece of yeah, so the goal of a surfer is to ride the section just in front of the whitewater peak of the wave, aka getting in the pocket. So you can imagine a wave. You know what I mean? There's that famous Japanese painting of the dude on the boat and the waves coming over. Imagine that painting with the white part at the front. You just want to be like just in front of that, like almost at the top of the wave, but not quite at the top, dude, because in the white water, you just can't be there, dude. You can't balance there. It's a small area, and also whitewater is like super aerated and stuff like that, so it's not the same density as the water as the rest of the water. So you want to be just in front of that thing. But I mean, if you're like a beginner surfer, your whole goal should just to be like to stand up on the board. Even if you're in like still water, your goal should be to stand up on the board. You could be on the ground, quite frankly. You could be like still on the beach. Your surfboard is fully on dry sand, and your goal should still just to be able to to stand up on that board. But if you're a little more experienced, you're gonna want to be getting into the pocket. You're gonna be wanting to ride that part just in front of the whitewater part of the wave, so you're like at the top of the wave, almost. And you're probably going to be above the whitewater part depending on how good you're surfing, how good you are at surfing, and how like what type of wave you're dealing with. Because you can't do that with a tube. With the tube, you can't be doing that obviously because the wave kind of collapses in on itself. But if it's just a regular swell, then you can kind of chill up there. And yeah, so that's what getting in the pocket means. And once a surfer masters the pocket, they can start carving, which refers to going back and forth along the wave. Once again, we're going to be referencing surfs up a whole lot here when we're talking about what it means when you actually get to surfing. But it's just like, when they're riding down that big old wave and they're kind of going back and forth, that's what carving is. And it's like those sharp turns where they don't like fully whip the tail of the board, but they're almost doing it, and they're just going back and forth down the wave. That's called carving it up, dude. And now we got another trick. So a similar trick known as the what? Well, cutbacks. So we got carving, and now we got a cutback. So a similar trick known as the cutback happens when a surfer whips the tail of their board along the crest of the wave. So like I said, getting in the pocket means you're just in front of like the whitewater crest of the wave, and then if you do a cutback, you kind of like whip. It's not like a carving where you kind of are just going back and forth. It's you literally like whip the end of your surfboard along the top of the whitewater part of the wave, and that helps you like gain speed so you can go fast as fuck down the wave. So that's another trick that you can be doing on the wave. And this is, like I said, dude, surfing is so sick to watch. The people that do it are complete dickheads, but it's just so fun to watch. And the same is true of probably a lot of sports, especially the UFC, dude. Everyone in the UFC, except for like some of the champs, are the biggest tools on earth. They're literally just dumb, dumb as rocks and like mean as hell. And I feel like that's what a lot of surfers are, and that's what a lot of UFC fighters are. But it still is very entertaining to watch, dude. Like I could watch surfing for a decent part of my day, especially dudes going down those big waves. And especially dudes hitting a cutback. Like that's very sick to be able to do. Like cause you're almost like you gotta think about it. You're almost like parallel with the ground, dude. You're hitting like a Michael Jackson lean when you're hitting a cutback. Or you're like squatting on the board and almost like Tony Hawking it, where he grabs the board and he's like kind of squatting down. But still, it's very sick to watch. And it also helps you gain speed, dude. It's almost like going down a hill, right? When you're like a little kid on your bike or whatever, that's basically what they're doing. They're going to the top of the hill and then they're shooting back down. That's what they're doing when they're trying to do a cutback. And now we got another trick. So this trick is called a floater, dropping a floater. So a floater is a trick where the surfer rides on the whitewater crest before coming back down. So this is different from a cutback. So in a cutback, you kind of like whip the tail along the whitewater part. But a floater is you go up, so you're going into the wave, right? Almost, but you're still on top of the water, obviously. All these tricks take place above water because by the definition of surfing, it's on top of the water. But this is like you kind of like go up and then you do almost like a cutback back down. That's what a floater is. I don't know how they come up with the name floater from there, but that's what it is. So as opposed to a cutback where you're back, where you're facing the shore basically the entire time, a floater, you turn around, go up, and then come back down. And I don't know how you do a cutback without turning into the wave, but they managed to do it somehow, dude. Like I said, I don't understand surfing at all or how they do it, but it's very sick to watch. And sometimes you got to drop a floater, dude. Hey, I understand it. I've dropped a few floaters. No, I haven't, dude. I have pretty dense. My shits are pretty dense. I've never really dropped a floater before, but I guess surfers just drop floaters all the time, dude. They're not. They're not. They're not dense enough, So they're dropping floaters, hitting floaters, and now we have the coolest trick of them all, in my opinion. So the air is the newest and most demanding trick in surfing, wherein a surfer turns from the coast into the wave, right? Once again, this is kind of like a floater where you're going into the wave and then coming back down, but it's even crazier than that. If you can't guess by the name, I'm going to explain it. So they turn into the wave, you ride to the top of the wave, thus propelling themselves into the air where they turn around and land forward again. And that's called a twist air or something like that, an air twist. But then I guess sometimes they just go up and then just land on the back part of the wave, which is it's very sick. But in like these surfing competitions, a lot of them are doing like just constantly catching air and just like turning back around. And I'm sure there's like different variations where it's like you try to spin as many times in the air as you can, like Tony Hawk or Skate 3 or whatever. But yeah, these guys are hitting it for real. And that's insane, dude. It's insane to like be going into the wave. It's crazy. And these are like big waves, right? Like competition surfers, they're probably surfing waves that are like on average like 20, 30 feet tall, like big ass fucking waves. And these guys, instead of like going towards the safety of the shore, they're like going into the wave, dude. Because it's like I'm sure they have enough control to like prevent the tip of their board from going into the wave. I definitely wouldn't. Even at the most skill that I could get at surfing, I would still like the front of my board would be going into the water and I'd just be like just going full on into the wave. But somehow these dudes like angle it upwards, hit the air, turn around, and come back in. And also like when you look at these competitive surfers, they're out in the water. They're like 4 miles out and they're in the middle of the ocean. Like they're in the middle of the water, dude. They're full on Captain Ahab. We talked about the Sussex boat that one time, dude. These guys are basically on the Sussex. They're like out in the middle of the ocean. There's nothing for, I mean, days out there, dude. Nothing. And they're out there going into the wave. I'd be like, get me back to shore as quick as possible. These guys are, it's impressive. Like I said, they're dickheads, but it's impressive, and that's probably why they're dickheads. And these tricks are all done on short boards, but longboard riders have probably the two most iconic tricks, dude. And I don't know, I think I'm more of a longboard guy than a shortboard guy because these shortboard guys are like, those are the dickheads, dude. Those are the surfing dickheads. You know, these are the guys that are like, yeah, just going down to LA, going to Tahiti real quick. Whereas I feel like longboard guys are probably a little more chill because you can't do like the crazy same crazy tricks that you can on a shortboard. On a longboard, you're just chilling, riding that wave back to the shore, being like, yeah, yo, that ruled. And also like the shortboard, it looks more aggressive. It's like pointed and stuff like that. It's like it has like a super aerodynamic shape. It almost looks like a military plane or something like that. But a longboard, it's just like this long chill thing. They usually have like bright colors on them and stuff, and they're like rounded at the tip. They just look more chill than shortboards, if I'm being fully honest. And so, what are the most iconic tricks in surfing, dude? Hanging 10. So hanging 10 refers to the act of having all 10 toes just off the front of the board. And you can only really do that with a longboard because the longboard has like a lot more balance to it, right? If you tried that on a shortboard, if you tried going to the front of the shortboard, it would like tip over and you'd fall over. But on a longboard, I think probably more of it's in the water, so that acts as a counterbalance. So you can go to the front of the board and just like stand there. And it that's just such a chill trick to have, where it's just like the craziest trick you can do is it's like walk to the front of your board and just stand there, as opposed to like these shortboard surfers that are like, yeah, I went 30 feet in the air, sick as hell, dude, and I turned around in midair. I basically did a McTwist, dude. It was so sick. But yeah, hanging 10 is just you're just standing at the front of your board. And it is very cool, right? Like I'm looking at pictures of it right now. It is very, they're just like standing straight. It's aura farming, basically. That's what hanging 10 is. It's aura farming. But it just looks so much more chill as opposed to these dudes that are like just, yeah, I did a cutback and then I carved it up a little bit. And then you talk to a longboard surfer and they're like, yeah, I stood at the edge of my board for a while. It was a nice, relaxing time. It was very relaxing to do that. And I'm sure none of it is that relaxing because you're like riding a wave, right? With like a 10-foot long piece of fiberglass. I'm sure it's like not that chill, but I do think longboarding is a bit more chill. And so now let's catch some waves, dude. You learned about the history, you learned about some of the more advanced tricks and stuff like that. But how do we get this thing going? So, uh, all right. So I thought I spelled surfboard so wrong. I was like looking at it and I was like, why did I spell it SOFT or SORT? Because my handwriting is so bad. No, softboards are ideal for learning to surf as they balance the stability of longboards with the quick paddling speeds of shortboards. And also, I'm sure like a little bit of the maneuverability of a shortboard. So it's the best of both worlds. It can't be doing any crazy tricks on it or anything like that, but when you're first starting out in surfing, you're not going to be able to do any of that fucking anyway, dude. Even if they gave you a shortboard, you wouldn't be able to do that, dude. You wouldn't be able to even like get up on it in the first place and paddle out. So you're going to be chilling on on a soft board most likely. And yeah, they are what they sound like, dude. This is what I used when I went out surfing. The one time that I did it, we were on a softboard. It's just like this big long piece of foam. There's like a hard plastic bottom and it has a leash that attaches to the board and then you attach it to your ankle. And that's how I'm sure they do that for a multitude of reasons. I'm sure part of the reason that they do it is so that they don't lose the board in the first place. But it's also about like not losing yourself, dude. This isn't Eminem, all right? No one's losing themselves in the music. The moment you own it, you better never let it go. God, that's how you know I'm white. I can just off rip sing the entire loser. I can't sing the entire thing, but yeah. And I think that's part of the reason why they do it though, is so that you always have like this personal flotation device that you're like constantly attached to. Um, and God, and I would rather have that than a life jacket, dude. Could you imagine like riding a surfboard with one of like those horse collar life jackets on? Like those bright orange, like Titanic survival life jackets? That would suck. But yeah, you're constantly attached to it at all times. Softboard, it's pretty chill. I don't even know. We might have had like those little fins that go down. I don't think we did though. I'll look up a softboard to see if you guys know what I'm talking about, like the little fin on the bottom part of the board that helps with like stability or whatever. I don't think we had those. I think it was just a flat bottom board. Oh no, some of them do. I don't think ours did though. Do all surfboards have that? Maybe I'm completely wrong. Softboard fin. I don't even know if the fin is what it's called. It's you guys know what I'm talking about. Yeah, some of them do, some of them don't. I don't think ours did though. Maybe they did. I imagine they probably were there because it seems harder to ride one without the fins. I feel like if you're riding one without the fins, then you know how to perfectly stabilize yourself on that thing. So yeah, that's what you're gonna want to start off with. All right. And you're not gonna be catching any barrels, you're just gonna be going with a classic swell. All right. You're just gonna have to accept it. It is what it is. And lessons usually start on land where students learn how to paddle and get up and stand up. And like I think we only did that for like 5 minutes when I went out surfing. The one time I did it. Like we were there for 5 minutes and they were like, all right. And then you get on top of you turn around, you get on top of the board, and the way you do it is you go one knee and you have one foot on the board, and then you push yourself up and you stand up. I really only got to the one knee and one foot. I think a lot of the times that I was doing it, I was on both knees because just because I'm trying to balance myself, and so I never got one knee, or I definitely did get one knee, one foot, probably once the entire time. It's insanely hard. And I think part of the reason why it was so hard for us is because we spent 5 minutes, literally like 5 minutes on the beach learning how to do that. And they were like, all right, you got it. Let's get in there, which I do respect that. That is the way I would prefer to do it because it's like, how many times can I practice getting up on one knee and one foot and then standing up, right? Like how many times can you practice that on land and then like apply it to it doesn't work that way. And so I'd rather actually get in there and do the thing. And honestly, this is where like the musculature comes into play with surfing is you basically you're kind of like doing a burpee when you stand up from your one knee and your one foot. You're kind of like doing a burpee from how I remember it, which is probably how I fell over most of the time. I probably got to like my knee and my foot a decent amount of times, but yeah, like trying to do a burpee on like a piece of foam that's floating and that's impossible. You're gonna fall over every single time you do it. It's it's so insanely hard. And then turning the board around and standing up were the most difficult for me as they require the most dexterity and balance. And so, yeah, the way you surf, obviously, you paddle out a little bit, you see the wave coming, you turn your board around, you wait to kind of catch the wave a little bit, and then you do get on one knee, one foot, then you do the burpee to stand up. But I very rarely got to that part. Most of the time, I was like, most of the times I fell off the board, I was like trying to turn the board around. It was just me and my like short little stubby arms, just like trying to paddle my way around so I could turn the board around. Um, and I'm going to talk about why I hate surfers so much in a second, dude. And the reason that I was never able to really catch a wave is because these goddamn surfers, and I hate them so goddamn much. So, yeah, this is the next thing I wrote on here. So if you see hot chicks in your lesson group, you ain't getting taught, dude. Look, and maybe I should have expected that going in. Maybe I should have seen like these two hot chicks. These two, I think they were German. I think we had like two German chicks in our group, and they were both pretty decent looking chicks, dude. And the guys, one of the guys was like a pretty chill, like what you imagine like a surfer did, just like there to like catch waves and just chill out and teach people about the things that he loves. The other one was a sex pest on a level you could not imagine. He spent the entire time with these two chicks. Like the other guy, it was these two chicks, and then like five of us, like me, my two cousins, one of my brothers, and maybe both of my sisters. No, I think it was only one of my sisters. So how many people is that? Me, two more people, and then yeah, five of us. And so it was one guy dealing with five of us, and then the other guy was like trying to like talk to these two chicks the entire. And this isn't an environment where you like talk to people at all. The guy says like, "All right, now turn around now." Like that's the most you can get out when you're surfing, right? Because you have waves coming at you. You have like a ton of water, like a literal ton of water coming at you. So you don't have time to like talk. And this guy, this fucking surfing dickhead, dude, and it's probably the reason why I hate surfers so much to this day, just completely ignored like five people to talk to two German chicks. And it's like, look, I'm sure the reason he was doing that is because it's worked a few times, but I mean, god damn, dude, like this is like a life or death situation here. Like anyone that's ever seen me before in real life in person, you can tell I'm not the most powerful athlete, especially when it comes to swimming. I have more of a powerlifting build. All right. I don't have the build to fucking, do a triathlon or to swim to Alcatraz Island or whatever. I don't have the build to be able to do that. Right. And so I'm clearly struggling the entire, like I said, most of the time I was in the water, I was just like trying to like get on top of my board. It's insanely hard. And this fucking surfing dickhead is just over here with like these two German chicks just doing it with them the entire time. And when we were done, they left the two German chicks left. This guy didn't even get laid. He like I I was like in the water, fully like spitting up like like when you get water in your mouth and you're like pushing it out through your teeth and you're like I was doing that for I don't know how long. It was really fun. I'll admit that. I love swimming and stuff like that, so it was really fun. But like we were out there for like 2 hours and this dude didn't look in our direction. He didn't even like glance at us. From the entire time these two German chicks pulled up, he was like staring at them. And they left him, like I said, they left immediately. First of all, this guy pulls up in a fucking van full of surfboards. No chick's going into a van full of fucking surfboards, all right? And if she does, she has chlamydia. So how about you rethink your decisions a little bit, dummy? It's like and also, the guy wasn't hot either. He wasn't. This was like we were in like the dirty fucking water of Los Angeles. We were like 5 minutes away from Venice Beach. This water is full of fucking sewage and stuff like that. This guy has a mutated like Simpsons animal face, like the fish with three eyes. That's what this guy fucking looks like. He's- So you live in a van. You live in a van full of surfboards. First of all, that alone should maybe be an indication that you're not going to be the most popular man with the ladies, right? That the fact that you live, and this isn't a nice van. This isn't like a Mercedes Sprinter. It's probably pretty expensive, but it's not a nice, shiny new Mercedes Sprinter that like Travis Scott rides around in the back of or whatever. This is like an old dirty van. And it's not like the iconic, it wasn't like the iconic Volkswagen Beetle. This was like the thing that Buffalo Bill kidnaps the chicks in Silence of the Lambs. That's what this dude is driving around in. It's like bright red. It's a Chevy. It has like chipping paint on it. And now that I'm thinking about it, it might have been the chill dude who was riding around in that van, but I'm gonna put it on this other dude. This other dude might have not even had a van in the first place. He might have not even had that privilege, that level of status. He might not even have had the van. And this is like an old Chevy that like chicks get skinned in the back of. That's what this fucking thing looks like. That alone, that fact alone prevents you from getting with 98% of women, 98% of people see that van, and this isn't a van with like the windows, right? There's no windows in the back. It's just so the back is like this dark area where you could easily hide a tied up person or a person that you murdered or whatever. This is a murder van. That's what this van is for. The fact that there were surfboards in the back of this van is a surprise to me, and it's a surprise to everyone. This is a van specifically designed for kidnapping and murder. Okay, so any woman that sees that, any person that sees that, instantly goes, "Nah, I like having my skin. I don't want this guy to wear my skin as a suit." So that alone, you're not getting any chicks. And then this guy, he's wearing like we all wore wetsuits, right? Because like LA, the water is like pretty cold, and so we were all wearing wetsuits. And this guy's sweatsuit, it had like short arms and short legs, right? It was like a short. This guy was wearing a short sleeved wetsuit, driving around in a murder slash skinning human beings alive van. Like this van looks like it would be used in Colombia to like pick up political dissenters or whatever. That's what this fucking van looks like. It doesn't even look fancy enough to like cook meth in the back of. This is a piece of shit van. And then you're wearing like this weird, like dorky little short sleeved wetsuit, and you're in the water the entire time. You can't even talk to these. You can't even speak to them. The most you can say is like turn around. Like that's literally all you have time for as this massive like wave comes to like wipe you out and drown you to death, right? And he's just spending the entire time with these two chicks, just like teaching those two how to surf. And it's like, first of all, they're Germans. They don't enjoy things, right? German people, they were German or Austrian or like some fucking weird, Slavic European thing. I know Austrians and Germans aren't Slavic, but you guys know what I mean. They're not like from France or Spain or Italy or something like that. They're from Germany. All right, if they were from Spain, I could understand you thinking you're gonna get laid off that, right? Like I feel like Spain has a little bit more like that sexual freedom. Germany doesn't have that. They're the most sexually repressed people on earth. They're freaks, they're disgusting sexual degenerates, but they're not sexually free people. They're very, very, very repressed. So, yeah, you're not gonna get laid off these chicks, all right? Just inherently, everything about you. You're not gonna get laid off these chicks. You don't have enough time to like talk to them to be like, yeah, my dad died or whatever, and then get some sympathy pussy, right? Because you're in the water. So you don't have enough time to like tell your entire life story to hopefully have one of these chicks feel bad for you and then give you a blowjob or whatever. That's not even happening. And then over here, little fatty dum dum can't even get up on the board, and I'm like barely have my head above water. God, it just and that's maybe the main reason why I hate surfers. It's just my head was like in the water, just like barely bopping up and down. I was just like like that, like fully like that. And this guy's over there like just with these two and what I want to talk I don't want to call women ugly. But you know, they're German. One of them was like Asian, but still, like if you live in Germany, you you just can't become that attractive of a person. It's a very repressive or oppressive environment. You know what I mean? It's an environment that like puts people down. You can't be that physically attractive if you live in like Germany or Austria or wherever these people were from. God. And one of them was Asian, but she was like from Austria or whatever. God, I just hate it. And that's the reason why I hate surfers so much, dude. And it wasn't even like if this was like a hot dude and I was like, okay, he's gonna get laid. No. He was like in a wetsuit. We were in this dirty ass water in fucking California. Brother, give it up. This isn't the time. This isn't the place to be doing that. But that is probably the reason why I hate surfers so much. And the other dude, he was chill, but he wasn't helping us at all. But he was just a chill guy. He was probably just out there to catch waves. So he was a chill guy, but yeah, I fucking it's just like, dude, she's not gonna fuck you, man. She's not. It's just simply isn't going to happen. Not in this environment. The water smelled awful. Every time I got it in my mouth, I was like, okay, well, I have cancer now. A tumor is about to start growing in my mouth. So the water's disgusting. The beach, there was like a schizophrenic guy talking to the sun. And there was another guy like battle rapping himself. Seriously. There was a guy talking to the sun, like both of his hands in the air, like he was an Aztec priest or something, fully speaking to the sun, having a conversation with the sun. And then there was another guy who was battle rapping himself. He's like one pac, two pac, three into the foe. He's like 8 Mile. This guy was doing 8 Mile versus himself, while the other guy is speaking to the sun, a non-living, non-sentient being. It's a ball of gas in space. So one guy's doing that. The other guy is battle rapping himself. We're on this dirty ass fucking beach with this dirty ass goddamn water that's just lapping against the shore. This isn't even water. Seriously, there's like more chemical and like poop and shit in this water than there is water. It's disgusting. And then the bathrooms that we had, those were also pretty gross. I'm pretty sure I stepped on a needle when I was in there. I mean, and then we got, and then we got this ugly. This guy's too ugly to be surfing in Hawaii. This is not a good looking guy. He had like gross Kurt Cobain blonde hair, just like, and a big old potato. I remember his face distinctly because I remember being like, "You're not hot enough. You're not like, even with like the surfing lifestyle, you're not attractive enough to like get laid off of like 1 2 hour surfing lesson." You know, you're riding around in a murder slash skinning people alive van with a bunch of surfboards like clacking around in the back. Like, let's say even hypothetically, one of these girls is like, okay, I'll go back to your, shitty little apartment that you split with 8 other people. Let's say that even happens hypothetically. You're not even going to be able to have a conversation with her on the way home to like even have her having sex with you be a possibility, right? Because any speech, any talking that you do is going to be drowned out by the surfing boards in the back going as you bump over the shitty fucking roads of Los Angeles, California. And that's probably the main reason why I hate surfers. I think that's probably the reason why I don't like them so much. You know, I had one bad interaction with one of them, but it was pretty fun when I was doing it, dude. It was, even though I was falling over constant, you have like that positivity almost where you're like, "Ah, I almost got it." And it's just that for like 2 hours straight. And it was very fun to do. And I do think it would probably be boring once like I mastered it, right? Because it's like the fun part about it for me was like getting knocked down and getting back up again and getting knocked down and getting back up again. So I think once you master it and you can just like catch any wave, like that's why the tricks are there, but tricks are for kids, dude. All right. That was retarded, but it is what it is. All right. And so now once you've mastered surfing and also have 10 grand to burn, it's time to pick an ideal spot. The best surfing spot in the world is the Pipeline in Oahu, Hawaii. The waves at Pipeline are 6 meters tall, so that's about 18, 20 feet, something like that. Let's call it 20 feet tall. Perfect tubes, dude, all year round. I guess it's just the way the wind blows. Doesn't really. Okay, that was. I almost started singing Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen. But I guess the way the wind blows there makes perfect tubes. But they go over razor sharp coral beds. So you got perfect tubes, but they're going over razor sharp coral beds. It's a bad deal. And if you're not a big tube guy, because I don't think longboarders can like surf in tubes, there's this place in South Africa that has like super good waves and they're just like super long. Like you can ride on that wave for like 6 minutes or however long it is. I don't know how long waves last, but you can ride on those waves for a super long time if you're more of a longboard type of guy. If you're just trying to chill on the wave for as long as possible. And then yeah, the Pacific coast is just great for surfing. There's like places in Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Bali, Indonesia, which that doesn't make sense, right? Because Bali, I think it's on the no, it's its own island. It's not on Java, but it's like it's surrounded by a ton of other islands. So like the wind doesn't have enough time to like make a big wave. So I don't know why it's so good for surfing, or maybe I'm wrong. But I do think it's like surrounded by a ton of other yeah. Eh, the south part probably has decent waves, and I don't know what part of Bali you go surfing on, but yeah. And then you got Australia and stuff like that. I don't know. I might start surfing in Mississippi or Louisiana or something like that. And then the last thing I wrote was let's get pitted, dickheads. Because that's all I've got for surfing, dude. That's all I've got for today's episode, guys. Yeah. I forgot to say have a good day slash week slash year slash life. Um, in the last episode. So I'll say it now. Have a good day slash week slash year slash life. And I'll see you guys in the next episode. Ping.